Alright, 6th graders, today we're moving on to the next chapter, which is chapter 5 in our books. Lessons 62 through 73 we'll be covering in this chapter. It'll be on fractions and number theories. Today, all we're doing is talking about, we'll be able to write fractions for parts of a set. We'll also be able to identify equivalent fractions. On your notes, I would like for you to define the word fraction, the word denominator, and the word numerator. You can find all three of those definitions at page 132. Also, add to your iExcel chart. You could do 6th grade T.I and T.2. It is covering the basics of fractions. Let's get started. Let's construct some meaning on page 132. It says, "If you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength." Mark 12:30, the first part of that verse. It's pretty interesting there. We even have fractions inside of us. We are a whole, but we have certain parts to us that make up that whole. Jesus tells us to love God with everything we have and all of our being. Not with just part of our heart or with a fraction of our heart, but with all of our heart. That's the whole. And you can look right here on the book on page 132, and it shows you a heart, and it's cut in half. We would call that 1/2. 1 being in the numerator and 2 being in the denominator. That would be 1/2. The numerator is at the top. The denominator is at the bottom. I always like to remember denominator with down because they both start with a D. So that's going to be on the bottom of your fraction. It says right here in the book there are 5 people. Now I don't have 5 people, but I have 5 shapes right here. And they're representing 5 people. I did all 5 different color shapes. And it says about 2 out of 5 Americans die due to cardiovascular disease. That would be like if I took 2 of these shapes out of this whole, which is 5. This is called a set. So 2 out of 5 is the same as saying 2/5. Also, if I look at another whole, I'm going to pretend that these are the submarine sandwiches that you see on page 132. It says if 2 submarine sandwiches were to be divided equally among 3 students, how much would each student receive? Well, I'm going to take it and I'm going to split it up for 3 students. So one student can have this. Maybe that's the turkey and ham. Another student can have this. Another student can have this. I've just separated a whole into 3 parts. The fraction is the result of this division. Here's a third, here's a third, and here's a third. We call each student is going to receive 2/3. 2/3. 2/3. Now, another word that you need to define is the word equivalent fraction. Equivalent. Equivalent fraction. I need to see the definition for that in your notes. Now, when talking about equivalent fractions, we multiply or divide the numerator, that's the top, and the denominator, that's the bottom, of a fraction by the same non-zero number. That means any number other than 0. To obtain what we call an equivalent fraction. That's a fraction that names the same amount. Just 2 different ways. And in the book, they give you an example. They gave you 6/8 and they gave you 3/4. Well, let's look at 6/8 first. All right, I'm going to erase this. And write 6/8. And I'm going to do just like the book did. They divided it by 2. Whatever you do to the top, you have to do to the bottom. And my answer is going to be 6 divided by 2 equals 3. 8 divided by 2 equals 4. So 3/4 is an equivalent fraction to 6/8. What if I took my little rods right here and I have 8 blocks, and then I do the same thing right here. I have 8 blocks. Right here I have 6/8. So 6/8 would be 6 of these. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this is 6/8. And then 3/4. If I was to split up into fourths, it would look the same because they're equivalent. They're equivalent. I could do it the other way. Instead of dividing, I could go 3/4 times 2 times 2. 3 times 2 is 6. 4 times 2 is 8. I would get the same thing. If you divide it or multiply it by the same number in the numerator and the denominator, you're going to get an equivalent fraction. They're going to be equal. They're just going to be split up differently. Now, if you look at your book at the bottom, it says 2/3 equals how many ninths? All right, so 2/3. 2/3 equals how many ninths? Well, I'm trying to find an equivalent fraction with 2/3. The way I do that is just pick a number. The book picked the number 3 and multiply the numerator and the denominator by 3. 3 times 3 equals 9. So 2 times 3 equals 6. So 6/9 is equivalent to 2/3. When we come back to class, I want you to try to do A through D. I want you to try A, B, C, D. If you do not get it correct, it's okay. I'm not counting off for that. But I do want you to risk it and try to answer the questions the very best you can, according to the information that we just went over. I'll see you in class.